Hey everyone, just wanted to start making short videos on some items that are affecting all of us every day. So this one's going to be, what exactly is PCR? According to the definition of the National Human Genome Research Institute, it's sometimes called molecular photocopying. PCR is a fast, inexpensive technique used to amplify, copy small segments of DNA. Because significant amounts of sample of DNA are necessary for molecular and genetic analysis, studies of isolated pieces of DNA are nearly impossible without PCR amplification. Often heralded as one of the most scientific advances in molecular biology, PCR revolutionized the study of DNA to such an extent that its creator, Carrie B. Mullis, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1993. Who is Carrie Mullis?
Who? Who? Were you fucking out?
So who is Carrie Mullis? Well, Carrie Mullis is, as stated, the inventor of the PCR test. Oddly enough, he passed away on August 7th, 2019, literally just before the pandemic hit. I think it would be beneficial to everybody if the man was still alive today to be able to put some of our questions to rest as to what the limitations of the PCR testing is. He has got videos out there, various videos. Some are difficult to find when I was trying to look for some, but he does state that there are limitations and that it's very easy to misinterpret information that you're gathering from PCR tests. So was nobody better suited to address the controversy that is right now on PCR testing than Carrie Mullis himself?
How do they misuse PCR to estimate all these supposed free viral RNAs that may or may not be there?
I think misuse PCR is not quite. I don't think you can misuse PCR. No, the results, the interpretation of it. See, if you can say, if they could find this virus in you at all, and with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It starts making you believe in the sort of Buddhist notion that everything is contained in everything else, right? I mean, because if you can amplify one single molecule up to something that you can really measure, which PCR can do, then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful. It is. No, there's very little of what they call HIV, and what's been brought out here by Phil Pott and Isai already, the measurement for it is not exact at all. It's not as good as our measurement for things like apples. An apple is an apple. You know, you can get something that's kind of like, if you got enough things that look kind of like an apple and you stick them all together, you might think it's an apple. But and HIV is like that. Those tests are all based on things that are invisible, and the results are inferred in a sense. PCR is separate from that. It's just a process that's used to make a whole lot of something out of something. That's what it is. But it's not. It doesn't tell you that you're sick, and it doesn't tell you that the thing you ended up with really was going to hurt you or anything like that.
So how exactly does PCR work? Well, to my rudimentary mind and trying to do research throughout this whole pandemic, I've come across multiple sources of the basics of how it works. Obviously, there's always little nuances in there, and not being a scientist myself, just applying logic where I can. My understanding is that it takes a sample and it amplifies it through cycles, light cycles. So what it means from that perspective is that with a small sample, the more cycles you run, you will find something. Carrie Mullis stated himself, you will find something regardless, anything. So the more cycles you run, the more likely you are to find something. But the more cycles you run makes it less likely that there's anything significant in the actual sample. So if you run less cycles, then in theory, if there's more material in a less amount of cycles, then you have a more chance of a positivity rate. So realistically, if we're running at a very high amount of cycles, and it's been stated that anything over 30 is considered a high amount of cycles. So anything over 30 is in theory, based on many of the papers I've read, is really not reliable.
You almost never can culture virus from a 37 threshold cycle. So I think if somebody does come in with 37, 38, even 36, you got to say, it's just dead nucleotides, period.
So anything that's 30, between 25 and 30 from what I've read, again, is more accurate and substantial in that if you find what you're looking for at those amount of cycles, then you are likely infected. We'll call it infected for lack of a better word, but we all know we're talking about COVID-19 here. So in Canada, we have a couple studies that were done, or maybe not even studies, just opinion, I guess, from a doctor from Harvard. And he's contesting the cycles in Canada should be closer to 30. In many papers, it says exactly where it should be. But yet, we have Toronto Public Health stating that many labs run their own cycles as per lab protocol, which I find really strange, because why is there not standardized testing throughout, especially in one city? So if one city's labs are setting testing for themselves, or the parameters for their testing themselves, then what does that mean for the rest of the province, the rest of Canada? Does that mean that every lab is running at a different standard? It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me when there's no standardized testing of any kind, no guidance, or at least they're not following the guidance based on some of the papers I've read that they should be around 30 cycles. Yet we're not seeing that here in Canada.
There's a flip side to that coin.
Funny part is a lot of this is all public knowledge. It's all out there for us to read, that there is no standard testing parameters, which again, to me, kind of falls on the wayside of why. In any situation, I think people want to know what the parameters of the test are. Like, I mean, if we know that there's a high likelihood that these results can be abused through the number, or just based on the amount of light cycles that we're running our testing at, then why is there not some sort of a standard? I just don't understand that. And there's been an absolutely crazy abundance of doctors throughout the world that have contested these tests. So what I don't understand is why so many doctors are being ridiculed. They've put their careers on the line to speak out against this, yet they're being called conspiracy theorists or people who are anti-vaxxers or whatever the case may be. And it doesn't really matter. The point to me is that they are still professional people. They're regular medical doctors, epidemiologists, virologists, all of them. There's all kinds of different professional titles speaking out against this, yet we're not taking their word in, at least not in the mainstream. Many of us are on other channels, I guess you could say, but I mean, I guess in a way that counts us all as conspiracy theorists because we choose to use a little more logic. Just showing these small samples of what I've dug up over time, and there's a lot more. In an effort to keep these videos short, I'm only going to show a couple of key points that I think really hit home and can really help people with hopefully digging a little deeper and kind of thinking for yourself on exactly what is going on. I'm no conspiracy theorist, but I also don't trust a word that that we're being told like everybody else is. I try to look at things with a grain of salt in just about every case. And what I can see right now, without a protocol for testing, it seems that our medical community is more of a wild, wild west for testing on what's going on when there should be. Is this a lack of leadership? Is this a lack of medical knowledge? Or is it people that are in government that aren't qualified to be there, that are just stating what somebody else is doing? And to be quite honest with you, I'd love to know what some of these people who just take every word for it, what is going through their minds. You know, what do they say when they see this information, when it's clearly available, it's out there and it's for everybody? And then they say, well, it's not from a reputable source. Well, what makes somebody reputable? Because the news tells us they're reputable?
Well, I am over fucking whelmed.